Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into something super colorful today. We're talking about Nepal's Holi festival, thanks to this excerpt from Nepal's Holi, the Festival of Colors and Spring by Shankar Man Singh. You sent this in. What caught your eye?
It's interesting. A lot of people just think of Holi as this huge Indian thing, but Nepal has its own unique traditions. I bet that's what you liked.
Totally. I love how one festival can be celebrated in so many different ways, kind of like different versions of the same song.
Yeah,
But for anyone who's not familiar with Holi, can you give us the basics?
for sure. Holi is a spring festival. Think throwing colorful powders, water, feasts, dancing, just pure fun. It's also about good versus evil, told through ancient stories.
Okay, now I'm even more curious. Tell me about those stories. Where did Holi come from?
One of the most famous stories is about this really devout kid, Prahlad, and his dad, King Hiranyakashipu. The king was a tyrant who demanded everyone worship him. But Prahlad was like, nope, I'm sticking with Lord Vishnu.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster, so what happened?
The king was furious. So he got his sister, Holika, involved. She had this magical cloak that made her immune to fire.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, they tricked Prahlad into sitting on a pyre with Holika, hoping to burn him alive. But get this.
I bet she got roasted and Prahlad was fine.
Exactly. Prahlad's faith protected him, and Holika's cloak flew off and shielded him instead. She burned, he survived. It's a powerful symbol of good conquering evil.
Wow, that's intense. So during Holi, do they like reenact that?
In a way, it's called Holika Dahan, and it's all about destroying negativity. They build bonfires and celebrate around them.
That must be quite the sight. Okay, back to Nepal. You mentioned they have their own way of doing things. What's different?
Well, they call it Phagu Purnima, and it happens on the full moon of the Falgun month, sometime in February or March. What's interesting is that even within Nepal, the date can change. The hilly region celebrates it a day earlier than the Terai region in the south, which lines up with when India celebrates it.
So many variations. It just shows you how complex traditions can be. So what happens during Phagu Purnima? What would I see if I was there?
Just picture this. You're walking down the street and bam! Suddenly you're covered in color. People are throwing these bright powders called abir everywhere, splashing water, and even launching water balloons called lolas.
Sounds like a blast. Controlled chaos, but a blast.
Totally. Music is pumping. You've got delicious traditional food like gujia, and everyone is just letting loose, embracing the energy of the festival.
Okay, so lots of color. What's the deal with those powders? Just random dyes.
Traditionally, they were all natural. Turmeric, flowers, sandalwood, things like that. Each color had a meaning too. Red for love, yellow for knowledge. But these days, you see synthetic colors mixed in.
Which brings up something interesting Shankar Man Singh mentioned. Globalization and commercialization.
Yeah, more people know about Holi, which is great, but it makes you think about authenticity,
Yeah.
and the environment.
It's a tough issue. But before we get into that, let's talk about one more unique thing about Nepal's Holi. You mentioned something about a bamboo pole, right?
Oh yeah, the Chire. In Kathmandu, a week before Holi, they put up this giant bamboo pole in Vasantapur Durbar Square, and they cover it in colorful cloths. It's pretty amazing to see.
I can imagine, but what does it mean?
It marks the official start of Holi. Symbolizes spring arriving, new beginnings, all of that, like a physical reminder of what Holi is about.
Okay, so we've got ancient stories, vibrant celebrations, and a huge bamboo pole announcing the fun. I'm getting a real feel for Nepal's Holi now. Oh, but we can't forget Lord Krishna. What's his connection to all of this?
Great point, because Krishna's story is all about playfulness, which fits perfectly with Holi. You see, Krishna was known for his dark skin. He once complained to his mother, Yashoda, that his friends teased him because he was darker than the gopis, the cowherd girls.
Aw, poor guy. I bet Yashoda had some wise words for him.
She did. She told him to just put color on the gopis' faces so they'd all look the same. Some believe that's how the whole color-throwing tradition got started.
That's a really sweet story. It's not just about mischief, it's about acceptance and seeing past our differences.
A message that's still important today, right?
So true. But before we get too philosophical, Shankar Man Singh also talked about the social and economic impacts of Holi. We'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about tradition versus change in a globalized world. See you after the break.
Okay, we're back. Let's get into those social and economic sides of Holi in Nepal. Shankar Man Singh had some really interesting points in that article.
Yeah, he did. He talked about tradition and globalization and economics all mixed together. That really got me thinking.
So first, social harmony. What did he say about how Holi brings people together?
Well, he talked about how during Holi, everyone is equal. It doesn't matter who you are, everyone's covered in color, everyone's laughing. It's like a reminder that we're all human.
It's like instead of saying we're all the same under the skin, it's we're all the same under the abir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Singh said that this feeling of unity during Holi can actually make a difference even after the festival is over. Like it helps people fix relationships and build stronger communities.
That's pretty cool. Like hitting the reset button on how we treat each other. If you can celebrate together, maybe you can get along better afterward, too.
Yeah, I think so. And this idea of unity also goes for celebrating differences too, like that story about Krishna and the gopis we talked
Oh,
about.
yeah, that was such a cute story.
Right. Well, Singh said that story, and the whole thing with all the bright colors shows how accepting Nepali culture is. Like, it's okay to be different, and we can all be united at the same time.
I like that a lot, especially these days when everyone's always arguing. Okay, but what about the economics of Holi? Singh talked about that too, right?
He did. He said Holi brings in tourists from all over, which is good for the economy. Hotels, food, souvenirs, all that stuff.
So it's good for business, especially after the winter when things are probably slower. But he also mentions some worries about Holi getting too commercialized.
Right. He was worried that if it's all about tourism, maybe it'll lose its real meaning.
Yeah, it's tough. You want people to experience these amazing traditions, but you don't want them to turn into just another tourist trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also talked about the environment, like all those synthetic colors and the amount of water they use. It's not the best.
Good point. It reminds us that we have to be careful, even when we're celebrating. But I noticed something about his writing. It wasn't all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it wasn't. It felt hopeful. Like he thinks Holi can adapt and keep its meaning, even with all these challenges.
I agree. I think it comes down to both locals and tourists being respectful and understanding what Holi really means. But this makes me wonder, is there a right way to celebrate Holi? It's supposed to be about freedom and joy. Are we allowed to say how people should celebrate?
That's a good question. It's a tricky balance, for sure. I don't think it's about telling people what to do. I think it's more about teaching them about Holi, where it came from, what it means, and how to be respectful.
I agree. Like finding a way to keep the tradition alive while also letting it change with the times. Maybe that's the beauty of Holi. It can be different for everyone, but still have the same core values.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in the article was how Singh talked about personal change during Holi.
Oh, interesting. What did he say?
He talked about how throwing the colors is like wiping everything clean, starting fresh. It's like a metaphor for changing yourself, getting rid of bad feelings, forgiving people, and starting the new season with happiness.
Like a big reset for your mind and body. I like that.
Me too. It makes you think about what we could all learn from Holi. What parts of our lives need a little bit of that holy magic?
That's a great question. But before we get too deep, let's talk about the downsides of Holi that we mentioned before. We talked about the environment, but what about people acting out of control? That happens sometimes, right?
That's true, and it's a real problem. Holi is supposed to be joyful and inclusive. And if someone is being disrespectful or hurting others, that's not okay. It goes against everything Holi is about.
So what can we do about it? How do you have fun without letting things get out of hand?
I think it starts with talking to each other, both locals and tourists, and explaining what's okay and what's not okay.
And maybe sharing stories like the one about Krishna and the gopis could help. It shows the fun and playful side of Holi the way it should be.
Right. It's about reminding people what Holi is really about. Unity, forgiveness, and celebrating together.
Okay, I think that's a good place to move on. We've covered a lot about Holi in Nepal, the stories, the traditions, the economy, even some of the problems. Now let's pull it all together and see what we've learned.
Sounds good. Let's take all those colorful pieces and see what picture they make.
Okay, so after all that, what are the big things about Holi in Nepal? What makes it so special?
We've covered a lot. I think one thing that really stands out is how it connects those old legends to things that are still important today, like Prahlad and Holika. It's not just a story. It's about good and evil. That's something everyone deals with.
Yeah, and it's cool how those stories are part of how people actually celebrate Holi. It's like they're living those values, not just remembering them.
Right. And that brings us to something else really important about Holi, bringing people together. When everyone is covered in color, it doesn't matter who you are. It's like a reminder that we're all connected.
And it's not just about ignoring differences, it's about celebrating them too. Like with Krishna and the gopis. It's okay to be different and still be part of something bigger.
Exactly. You don't have to be the same to be united. It actually makes things more interesting when everyone is unique.
And it's not just about people, right?
Hmm?
Holi celebrates spring, that connection to nature and how everything starts fresh again.
Definitely. Like the Chair in Basantapur. That big bamboo pole is like a symbol of spring arriving, a reminder that things are always changing and growing.
But like we talked about, there are challenges for traditions like Holi in a world that's always changing. Globalization, tourism, it's not always easy.
That's true. We have to think about how to share these traditions with the world without losing what makes them special, and how to keep them going in a way that's good for the environment too.
And we can't forget about the problems that sometimes come up, like people using those synthetic colors or just behaving badly.
Yeah, that's the opposite of what Holi should be. We have to
Yeah,
talk about those things, educate people, and make sure everyone is celebrating in a way that's safe and respectful.
it all comes back to remembering that Holi is more than just a party. It's a really deep celebration with a lot of history and meaning.
Absolutely. It's about joy, forgiveness, starting over. Those are things we all need, whether we're celebrating Holi or not.
So, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember about Holi in Nepal?
I want them to see it as more than just a colorful festival. It's a whole world of stories, symbols, and ideas about what it means to be human.
I love that. And maybe it'll inspire them to find ways to bring some of that Holy Spirit into their own lives. The joy, the forgiveness, the new beginnings.
Because really, the best part of Holi isn't just the party, it's how it makes you feel inside.
I think that's a perfect way to end our deep dive. Thanks for joining me on this journey. And to our listeners, I hope your lives are full of color and joy, just like Holi.